For decades, Buckingham Palace has survived scandals, secrets, and silent compromises, but this time, everything stopped. Guards didn't whisper. Courtiers didn't deflect. And when Camilla was calmly but firmly escorted out of a restricted wing, staff realized this was no routine security check. Something had been found. Something sealed, hidden, and never meant to surface. Within minutes, the palace entered lockdown mode, and the monarchy's balance of power began to tilt. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The silence that followed was heavier than any announcement could have been. Doors that were usually open stood sealed. Hallways emptied. Phones stopped ringing. Senior staff, people who had weathered abdications and betrayals, felt an unfamiliar chill move through the building. This was not a drill, not a misunderstanding smoothed over with protocol. This was control, precision, intent, and everyone could feel it. The palace, a place built on continuity and calm, had slipped into a state of measured panic, where every step was watched and every breath seemed too loud. Camilla's removal sent shockwaves through the inner machinery of the household. Long-serving aides exchanged glances they had not shared in years, glances that asked questions no one dared speak aloud. How could this happen so suddenly? Why now? There was no explanation offered, no gentle briefing to soften the blow. Instead, there was only movement. Security repositioned. Access badges failed without warning. Names that once opened doors were suddenly useless. The message was unmistakable, something had crossed a line, and the response would be absolute. As word traveled upward, it did not spill outward. Senior royals were informed quietly, deliberately, before even the most trusted press contacts caught a whisper. This was containment, not confusion. A choice had been made to act first and explain later if explanations would ever come at all. Inside sources would later describe the atmosphere as one of controlled fear, a careful balance between obedience and disbelief, where loyalty began to feel conditional rather than assumed. What unsettled people most was not the escort itself, but the certainty behind it. There was no hesitation in the guards' movements, no debate in their eyes. Orders had been clear. Timelines had been set. This was not about optics. It was about urgency. And urgency inside a palace built on patience suggested something far more dangerous than scandal. It suggested risk. Exposure. Consequences that could not be delayed. In the quiet that followed, alliances subtly shifted. Staff who once stood together found themselves measuring words, choosing sides without realizing it. Trust, that most fragile currency of the monarchy, began to thin. Everyone sensed it. Whatever had been discovered did not just implicate one person, it threatened to rearrange the hierarchy itself. And as the palace settled into an uneasy stillness, one question echoed through its walls, unanswered and unavoidable. But the true shock wasn't the escort, it was why security was inside Camilla's private safe in the first place. I want you to write a detailed script based on the outline I provide for a royal monarchy using a bold, dramatic, and immersive storytelling approach. The script should be structured according to the provided subheading, ensuring that each section builds upon the previous one without abrupt endings or disconnections. The script must maintain a smooth, continuous narrative flow rather than feeling segmented, and follow the words count length mentioned with each outline, right in a paragraph format. Hook and transition line will be same, according to section for all. Tone and style. The script should have a bold, cinematic, and suspenseful tone to keep the audience engaged. The storytelling should be narrative-driven, focusing on mystery, foreshadowing, and emotional highs and lows. Avoid a dry, biographical format. The script should feel like an investigative and shocking expose. No visual descriptions, scene instructions, or visual storytelling elements. This should be purely narrative. Use a mix of short and long sentences to control pacing and enhance drama. Engagement techniques that must be used. Cliffhangers and foreshadowing must be incorporated to build suspense. Ensure the script remains emotional and immersive, making the audience feel the struggles, triumphs, and betrayals. No standalone endings in any section. Each section should naturally flow into the next subheading without abrupt conclusions. Use bold and dramatic phrasing to emphasize key moments, struggles, and turning points. Highlight the contrast between success and suffering, making the story compelling. Section breakdown and storytelling approach. Each section must maintain a smooth transition, ensuring a continuous flow of storytelling. The narrative should be engaging, avoiding unnecessary factual overload. Avoid listing events mechanically. Each event must be woven into the broader arc of their journey. The script should not reset at each subheading but carry the momentum forward, ensuring previous and next subheadings remain connected. Language and accessibility. Use simple yet powerful language that is accessible to a broad audience. Maintain a storytelling approach, so the script should feel like a dramatic retelling rather than an encyclopedia entry. Avoid formal or academic tones, but the language should feel conversational and immersive. Ensure vivid descriptions through strong word choice rather than relying on visual cues or direct scene instructions. Insert subheading here. Target length, 0 out of 550 words. Tone and style, dark, unsettling, emotionally intense. Hook, 60, 80 words. Those present describe a moment of stillness. No gasps, no raised voices, just stunned silence. Inside the safe were items no one expected to exist, let alone be preserved so carefully. This wasn't about valuables or correspondence. It was about history rewritten, loyalties questioned, and proof that someone had been quietly preparing for a very different future than the one the public was shown. Key points. Discovery of materials deemed non-royal in nature. Items allegedly contradicting public palace narratives. Emotional reactions from veteran security personnel. Immediate decision to seal the area and restrict movement. Realization that the find implicated more than one. Figure. Foreshadowing that some items point directly at succession tensions. Transition line. Within minutes, the discovery was escalated to the highest level, and the response was swift. Generate a detailed documentary-style script based on the provided outline and subheading. Maintain a bold, dramatic, and engaging storytelling approach with smooth transitions between sections. Avoid word repetition and ensure each section flows naturally into the next. Avoid adding outline headings, just write the script and follow the word's count length given along with each outline above. Those present describe a moment of stillness, no gasps, no raised voices, just stunned silence. Inside the safe were items no one expected to exist, let alone be preserved so carefully. This wasn't about valuables or correspondence. It was about history rewritten, loyalties questioned, and proof that someone had been quietly preparing for a very different future than the one the public was shown. What emerged from the safe immediately defied the unspoken rules of royal containment. These were materials deemed non-royal in nature, objects and records that did not belong within the carefully controlled ecosystem of the palace. Their presence alone suggested intent, not accident. They carried the weight of planning rather than preservation, and the implication cut deep. Someone had curated a private archive beyond the reach of protocol, beyond the comfort of shared truth. In a place where every document is cataloged and every artifact accounted for, this collection stood apart, deliberately isolated. As the contents were assessed, a deeper unease settled in. Several items appeared to contradict long-standing palace narratives, challenging versions of events that had been quietly reinforced over years. The effect was destabilizing. Truth inside the monarchy is rarely absolute. It is shaped, softened, and strategically managed. But these materials did not soften anything. They sharpened doubt. They raised questions about who knew what and who had chosen silence while allowing another story to stand. Veteran security personnel, individuals trained to remain detached under pressure, struggled to maintain composure. Some looked away. Others stared too long. This was not fear of punishment, it was the shock of recognition. They understood the gravity of what they were seeing and the damage it could inflict if mishandled. Experience told them that certain discoveries cannot be unseen, and this was one of them. The room felt smaller. Time felt compressed. The decision to seal the area came quickly and without debate. Movement was restricted. Communications were limited, not as a precaution, but as a necessity. The find was no longer just sensitive, it was volatile. Every additional person allowed near it increased the risk of fracture, of rumor becoming reality before containment could take hold. In that moment, the palace reverted to its most primal instinct: control first, explanation later. As the implications unfolded, it became clear that the discovery did not implicate a single figure acting in isolation. Threads pointed outward, toward relationships, shared decisions, and silent accommodations made over time. This was not a lone secret. It was part of a broader pattern, one that suggested complicity through inaction as much as intent through action. That realization unsettled even those accustomed to navigating moral gray zones. Most troubling of all were subtle indications that some items touched directly on succession tensions, documents, and symbols that hinted at alternate outcomes. Alternate paths the monarchy could have taken or might yet face. The suggestion alone was incendiary. Succession is the spine of the institution, the one subject never treated lightly. To imply interference, preparation, or contingency planning around it was to threaten the very foundation of continuity the crown depends on. By the time the final item was catalogued, everyone present understood that the safe had not merely protected secrets. It had preserved leverage. And leverage, once exposed, demands a response. The silence that followed was not relief, it was the pause before action, heavy with the knowledge that this discovery could not be buried without consequence. Within minutes, the discovery was escalated to the highest level, and the response was swift. No announcement echoed through the palace halls. No explanation was offered. Yet a single instruction was delivered with unmistakable finality: Camilla was to be escorted out immediately. No delay. No discussion. For those who heard it, the meaning was clear. This was no misunderstanding. This was containment. The order moved through the palace with surgical precision, passed quietly from one authority to another until it reached the people trained to act without hesitation. It did not come wrapped in ceremony or softened by tradition. There was no appeal to protocol, no symbolic language to preserve dignity. This was operational, stripped of pageantry, and that alone signaled how serious the situation had become. When ceremonial norms are bypassed inside the monarchy, it means the risk has already been calculated and deemed unacceptable. Those nearby sensed the shift instantly. Staff who were accustomed to reading nuance in every word understood that silence itself was part of the command. No questions were invited. No clarifications offered. The escort was not framed as protection or precaution, but as necessity. A line had been crossed, and the response was designed to be swift enough to prevent resistance, emotional or otherwise. Camilla's reaction, according to those who witnessed it, was controlled but unmistakably strained. She did not protest. She did not raise her voice. Yet the composure she maintained carried the weight of someone absorbing the realization that something fundamental had changed. Years of status, influence, and assumed security could not shield her in that moment. Whatever had been found had stripped away the comfort of familiarity and replaced it with uncertainty. Around her, staff were instructed not to intervene, not to speak, not even to acknowledge what was happening beyond what their roles required. It was a silence enforced not by fear, but by understanding. Everyone present knew that participation, even through curiosity, could be interpreted as alignment. And alignment, at a time like this, could be dangerous. As she was escorted away from the restricted wing, systems quietly adjusted in her absence. Access permissions were altered almost instantly, doors that once recognized her authority no longer responding in the same way. These changes were subtle, invisible to the public, but devastating in implication. They suggested that this was not merely about physical movement through space, but about the suspension of trust itself. What unsettled observers most was the ambiguity of the action. Was this a temporary removal designed to diffuse an immediate threat? Or was it the first step in something far more permanent? No one could say. The palace thrives on clarity of hierarchy, yet in this moment, clarity was withheld. That uncertainty bred speculation, and speculation bred fear. As Camilla disappeared from view, the palace did not exhale. It held its breath. Because removal, as dramatic as it was, solved nothing on its own. It only created space for conversations that could not happen in her presence. Space for decisions that would redefine loyalties, and space for consequences that could no longer be postponed. But removal from the building was only the beginning. The real reckoning was unfolding behind closed doors. As Camilla was escorted away, a smaller, far more powerful meeting was already forming. No press, no advisors, no outsiders. Only those whose silence could shape the future of the crown. Voices were raised. Alliances cracked. And for the first time in years, the question wasn't about public image, it was about survival. The emergency inner council assembled with a speed that betrayed how prepared they were for crisis, even if none of them had expected this one. Seats were taken without ceremony. Titles mattered less than influence now, and influence shifted with every word spoken. The room carried the weight of consequence. Everyone understood that what was discussed there would never be recorded, never acknowledged, yet would ripple outward for years. Divisions surfaced almost immediately. Some argued for absolute containment, insisting that silence was the monarchy's greatest shield. They warned that even a controlled disclosure could spiral, feeding speculation and eroding trust beyond repair. Others pushed back, their frustration sharp and unfiltered. Inaction, they argued, was its own kind of exposure. If the truth emerged without preparation, the damage would be catastrophic. The argument wasn't ideological, it was existential. Fear of leaks hovered over every exchange. Names were not spoken aloud, but suspicions were clear. Who knew what, and who might talk if pressed? The palace had weathered leaks before, but this felt different. The discovery had created fractures that silence alone could not mend. Every delay increased the number of people carrying the burden of knowledge, and with it, the risk that someone would break. The emotional strain on senior royals was unmistakable. Years of carefully maintained unity began to strain under the pressure of competing instincts. Protect the institution. Protect the truth. Protect themselves. Some leaned back, guarded and calculating. Others leaned forward, voices tight with anger or fear. This was not politics as usual. This was the raw negotiation of power when the usual rules no longer applied. At the heart of the debate lay a single dangerous question. Did the public ever need to know? One camp argued that revelation would only invite chaos, that the monarchy's role depended on mystery and restraint. Another countered that secrecy had limits, and those limits had just been tested. If the truth surfaced on its own terms, stripped of context, the crown would be left defenseless. Better to shape the narrative now than chase it later. As the discussion deepened, a sobering consensus began to form, not agreement but recognition. Containment might no longer be possible. The safe had been opened. Knowledge had spread, and once knowledge exists, it resists confinement. The institution could slow the fallout, perhaps redirect it. But stopping it entirely felt increasingly unrealistic. The room grew quiet as this realization settled in. It wasn't defeat, but it was acceptance. The monarchy had always thrived on control of timing and tone. Now both were slipping. Decisions made in the coming hours would not just address the immediate crisis, they would define the balance of power within the royal family itself. As arguments escalated, one chilling realization surfaced: the contents of the safe may not have been meant for the present at all. The most unsettling theory wasn't about what was found, but why it existed. Security experts and palace insiders began to ask a dangerous question. Was this a contingency? A safeguard? Or evidence of quiet preparation for a future that contradicted everything the monarchy projected to the world? As interpretations deepened, a chilling pattern began to emerge. These items did not read like keepsakes or private comforts. They felt deliberate, strategic, as if they had been assembled with foresight rather than nostalgia. In a family where sentiment is often weaponized through symbolism, this collection stood apart, stripped of emotional softness and sharpened by purpose. That distinction alone raised alarms. Strategy implies anticipation. Anticipation implies expectation. And expectation, within the monarchy, is never neutral. The implications of long-term planning unsettled even the most seasoned observers. Planning suggests timelines. It suggests contingencies mapped out long before necessity demands them. Those studying the contents privately questioned how far back this preparation extended and what assumptions it rested on. Had someone been quietly positioning themselves against outcomes they publicly denied were possible? The idea that parallel futures were being considered, perhaps even rehearsed, introduced a level of psychological fracture the institution had not faced in decades. Whispers of leverage followed quickly. Not crude threats, but something far more sophisticated, influence preserved through possession. Information, when held privately, becomes power when circumstances shift. The fear was not that these items would be revealed immediately, but that their existence alone could shape decisions, silence objections, or force hands at critical moments. In that light, the safe stopped being a storage space and became a pressure point. Those who felt blindsided reacted with a mix of anger and disbelief. Some questioned their own judgment, replaying past interactions with new suspicion. Others felt betrayed, realizing that trust had been asymmetrical all along. The emotional toll was not theatrical, it was corrosive. Confidence eroded quietly, certainties softened, and the unspoken question lingered. If this was hidden, what else might be? Distrust began to spread among senior household figures, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Conversations changed tone. Words were chosen more carefully. Familiar assurances lost their comfort. The monarchy depends on shared belief as much as shared blood, and that belief had taken a blow. Once people begin to suspect that futures are being privately hedged, unity becomes performative rather than real. Foreshadowing crept into every exchange. If these preparations were meant for a moment that had not yet arrived, then the current crisis might only be a trigger, not the destination. The damage unfolding now could be the beginning of a longer unraveling one that no single decision could reverse. Internal trust, once fractured, rarely returns whole. It shifts, hardens, and leaves scars that define what comes next. As the palace grappled with these implications, a sobering truth took hold. The discovery had introduced doubt into spaces that once relied on certainty. And doubt, left unchecked, multiplies. It reshapes loyalties, reframes motives, and turns cooperation into calculation. Whatever the intent behind the safe, its exposure had already begun to redraw internal lines. By now, the palace understood one thing clearly: keeping this contained would not be easy. Phones were confiscated. Emails went unanswered. Staff were rotated without explanation. Because the greatest fear wasn't Camilla, it was exposure. If even fragments of what was found escaped palace walls, the monarchy wouldn't just face embarrassment. It would face a legitimacy crisis. The response was immediate and uncompromising. Long-standing routines were suspended as if they had never existed. Devices vanished into sealed envelopes. Access to internal systems narrowed without warning. People who had worked side by side for years suddenly found themselves reassigned, separated, or placed on sudden leave. Not as punishment, but as prevention. The goal was simple and ruthless: reduce the number of minds carrying the truth, and reduce them fast. Communications teams felt the pressure first. Their role had always been to manage narrative, to soften edges and redirect attention. Now they were being asked to do something far more difficult: prepare for silence. No statements, no denials, no reassurance. The anxiety was palpable. Silence can be powerful, but it can also be interpreted as guilt, and the line between the two is dangerously thin. Every passing hour without explanation felt like a gamble. Quiet internal investigations were launched, the kind designed not to uncover wrongdoing, but to map knowledge. Who had been present? Who had heard what? Who had spoken to whom? The questions were methodical, almost clinical, but the implications were personal. Careers, reputations, and loyalties were being weighed in private ledgers no one would ever see. In a system built on discretion, even suspicion carried consequences. Concern grew over what might already be beyond control. Had anyone messaged a trusted contact? Had a remark been overheard and misinterpreted? The palace had always assumed leaks came from malice or ambition, but this situation introduced a more unsettling possibility: accidental exposure, driven by shock. People talk when they are shaken, and many inside the palace were shaken. Comparisons to past royal crises surfaced quickly, but none offered comfort. This felt larger, more volatile. Past scandals had centered on behavior or relationships. This one struck at structure, at continuity. at the unseen mechanisms that hold the crown together. The fear was not a headline. It was a chain reaction. Once legitimacy is questioned, everything else follows. Time became the enemy. Every delay increased the chance that rumor would outpace control. Every hour allowed speculation to ferment outside the palace gates. Those tasked with containment understood the stakes. This was no longer about managing a single figure or incident. It was about protecting the very idea of stability the monarchy depends on. And stability, once cracked, is impossible to fully restore. As containment efforts intensified, a quiet realization spread among those at the center of it all: even if nothing leaked today, tomorrow was uncertain. Information has a way of resurfacing, of finding new paths when old ones are blocked. The palace could slow the fallout, perhaps even redirect it, but stopping it entirely felt increasingly unlikely. And while the palace scrambled to contain the fallout, Camilla was left facing an uncertain and unprecedented isolation. No statement, no denial, no reassurance. Camilla's silence became louder than any press release ever could. Those who knew her best described a woman calculating her next move, fully aware that the power dynamics had shifted and that nothing would ever return to how it was before the safe was opened. Inside the palace, the absence of her voice unsettled even those who had argued for restraint. Silence, in this context, was not passive. It was strategic. Every hour without comment forced others to fill the void with speculation, fear, and second-guessing. Some saw it as defiance, others as self-preservation. Either way, it denied the palace the one thing it desperately needed: control of the narrative. Privately, insiders spoke of a profound emotional toll. The sudden removal, the loss of access, the quiet recalibration of status all landed at once. This was not the slow erosion of influence over time. It was abrupt, clinical, and deeply personal. For someone accustomed to certainty, the shock of isolation carried its own kind of grief. Familiar assurances vanished overnight, replaced by guarded conversations and carefully measured reactions. Questions began to surface about who she was speaking to, if anyone at all. Legal counsel was assumed. Strategic advisors, likely. Not to issue a statement, but to assess risk. To understand exposure. To map possible outcomes in a situation where loyalty could no longer be assumed and protection was no longer guaranteed. The silence suggested preparation rather than paralysis, and that distinction made many uneasy. Some wondered whether she had anticipated this moment, whether the existence of the safe itself implied foresight, a recognition that circumstances could one day turn hostile. If so, then her current restraint might be part of a longer plan, one designed to wait, observe, and respond only when the balance of power clarified. Others believed the silence signaled retreat, an acknowledgement that confrontation would only accelerate consequences. What was clear was that her absence from the public conversation shifted attention inward. Without her voice, the focus turned to the institution itself, its fractures, its fears, and its ability to withstand internal shock. Silence became a mirror, reflecting back the anxiety of those left behind. Every unanswered question amplified the sense that the story was far from finished. As the hours passed, speculation hardened into expectation. Silence could not last forever. Eventually, there would be a response, whether spoken, written, or implied through action. And when it came, it would not be measured against what was said, but against everything that had been withheld. As night fell over the palace, one final question lingered: what happens next? Some royal scandals fade, others redraw the map entirely. This one belongs to the latter. Because once a private safe is breached, once trust is broken at the highest level, the damage can't be undone, only managed. And tonight, the monarchy stands on the edge of a transformation no one saw coming. What has unfolded is not a single incident, but a rupture that reaches deep into the structure of royal hierarchy. Power within the palace has always depended on unspoken understandings: who is protected, who is trusted, and who is indispensable. Those assumptions have now been shaken. Lines that once felt permanent are suddenly negotiable, and positions once thought untouchable are being quietly reassessed. The crown may remain, but the balance beneath it is shifting. The most lasting consequence is not public outrage, but internal fracture. Unity inside the monarchy has always been carefully performed, even when disagreements simmered beneath the surface. Now, that performance feels strained. Trust has thinned. Loyalty is being measured, not assumed. Conversations that once flowed easily are now cautious, weighed down by the knowledge that secrets can exist far closer than anyone believed. Certain protections, once taken for granted, have quietly expired. The belief that some doors would never be opened, that some truths would never be questioned, that some figures would always be shielded by tradition alone, those beliefs no longer hold. And when protections disappear, so does the comfort that allowed the institution to function without constant suspicion. To the public, calm remains intact. Appearances are maintained. Schedules continue. The monarchy looks unchanged from the outside. But behind closed doors, the contrast is stark. Private chaos hums beneath public composure. Every decision is scrutinized, every silence analyzed. The effort required to sustain normalcy grows heavier by the hour. Perhaps most ominous are the warning signs pointing forward, not backward. This discovery has opened a door that cannot be fully closed. Even if the contents of the safe are never revealed in full, their existence has altered expectations. It has shown that unseen preparations can exist alongside public certainty, and that realization alone invites further questions. Questions that rarely stay unanswered forever. What remains now is anticipation, not of closure, but of continuation. This story does not end with containment or silence. It lingers. It reshapes relationships. It alters decisions yet to be made. The monarchy has survived countless storms, but this one carries a different weight not because of what the public knows, but because of what those inside can no longer ignore. Because what was found may never be fully revealed, but its impact has already begun to reshape the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.